Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are. Hosted by Desiree Duffy.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Desiree Duffy, and I am the host of the Books That Make You show. And today, we're talking about books that make you heal spiritually. Now, healing takes on a lot of different forms. Modern medicine can be helped and impacted in a lot of different ways. I don't know. It seems to me that maybe keeping an open mind and doing research, being diligent, well, that can help us heal in many different ways. Our guest today says she has scientific evidence that energy medicine promotes speedy recovery and positive outcomes. Sandy Edwards' book is called Spiritual Healing in Hospitals and Clinics. Sandy is a fellow of the Healing Trust in the UK. She set up a voluntary healing clinic and volunteered in hospitals before instigating the largest medical research trial of spiritual healing, the results of which she presented at the House of Parliament in London. Now, Sandy has served as a trustee of the Healing Trust charity, and she lives in Dorset in the UK, where she is joining us from today. Hi, Sandy. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Desiree. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's thrilling. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I love having guests from around the world. So having you join us from the UK is a special treat. And finding out about your research and the amazing things that you're doing is so tantalizing. Let's start with the big question, though. Can you describe, what exactly do we mean by spiritual healing? What is that?
The way I see it is that it's unseen energies that we know must be there. And when I'm attuning myself to the energies of the universe, I feel as though I'm in a column of brilliant golden white light. And that's energized from Mother Earth below and from the cosmos above. That's how I experience it. And it's at that point then that I link up with whoever it is who's come for healing. And that person could be me. We can heal ourselves, we can heal our loved ones. And it's really important, though, to have training from a reputable organisation so that you're never using your own energy to help others. That's so easy to do. So did that answer the question for you?
Yeah, I'm curious. So our own energy, how does this work? Is that a question I can ask?
I don't think anybody really knows how it works. And if they did think they knew, they probably wouldn't be able to prove how it works. But the important thing is that it does work. And that's been proved to me many, many times, hundreds and thousands of times, and to any other people who are doing healing. It's a natural part of being human, but it has been forgotten about by the majority, I suppose. And my book, I hope, will encourage people to investigate this for themselves. There's so much information and help out there in books and videos, free videos on YouTube by really wonderful presenters. But my book is about the research that gives evidence that this is true.
And I love that. I love that because this is a huge claim, right? And, the evidence, the research, that's what's so important. And the fact that you're using science and you're looking at the data, it's more than just, somebody relaying a story or saying my cousin had this thing happen. You're scientifically doing the research. And I want to talk about that. I do want to talk about that. I just want to say first that, going back to what is it? What is this thing? I've always just felt that no matter what it is, we'll just say it could be from outside, it could be from inside, but our brains are inside of our bodies. Our brains control everything that's going on in our body. And it always just struck me as we could not tell our own brains to do something within our own bodies to make it healthy. Like, hi, brain, why don't you kill that disease that's inside of me? Like, we're connected. We are the same thing, but we have this feeling, I guess, in modern medicine that our own selves can't talk to our own bodies. So I don't know if I'm making sense there.
I think we can. And this incredible brain that we have, I don't think we use it in any way, shape, or form of the maximum it could be used. According to things that I've read, there's only a small percentage of the brain that we are known to use in comparison to the full size of the brain. They're learning more and more as technology advances. We can't learn more and prove it until more advanced technology comes out. But this idea of us not necessarily being a victim to whatever is happening to us in our bodies or in our lives, because healing helps with mind, body, and emotions. We're not just one thing. We're all three of those together. And some people would say additionally, spiritually as well. But the fact that spiritual healing, and it is a fact that spiritual healing can help us with any situation, means we don't have to continue to suffer. And even if it doesn't work, the way that we do healing is so joyous, that's beneficial in itself. So, but I think I probably need to tell you the miraculous story of how this research came about. Who funds spiritual healing research? How many doctors do you know that would even take it seriously? So it's a magical adventure how this came about, in my view. Just see what you think. So I had no sign of a natural healing ability, but I was wanting to solve psoriasis, which is a scalp condition that's embarrassing, flaky, itchy. And I tried to resolve this with medication, but there's only steroid cream. So I didn't want to use that. And so then I went down the unconventional routes, and I had hypnosis and every kind of thing I could think of. And ultimately, someone told me that I should learn to do spiritual healing because apparently I had spiritual energy within me that wasn't being used in a constructive way. And by giving healing, that would be a good way to use it constructively. Mm-hmm. So I trained with the Healing Trust. One phone call to a friend who was involved in spiritual things introduced me to the Healing Trust, which I'd never heard of before. And I trained with them. And on the way home from qualifying, it takes 2 years to qualify, I had the idea to apply for a lottery grant to open up a voluntary healing group near to where I live. The Healing Trust has a number of them throughout the country, and it gives access to more people to have affordable sessions of healing, spiritual healing. So this group, which still offers healing to the public now, 20 years later, 5 years after we opened in 2000, the year 2000, a lady came for healing, and she'd been a couple of times already, but this time she was linked with me. So I had met her for the first time now, and I noticed on her client card that nobody had made a note of where she'd found out about us from. So I like to have that information, because if we wanted to do some advertising, it always had to be free advertising because we were a voluntary group. It would be good to know where most people would hear of us from. And it was astonishing that she told me that her consultant at the hospital had sent her. So I found out his name, and I wrote to him offering to give healing to his patients at the hospital free of charge. And to reassure him, I listed all the professional standards that the Healing Trust adheres to, which I thought must be a given necessary for treating patients in a city hospital. So I also mentioned that we don't manipulate, we don't use any needles or potions or anything. It's totally complementary to conventional care. And I also, for good measure, mentioned 2 healers belonging to the Healing Trust who already were working in hospitals as paid healers, which is so unusual.
Oh,
very
that's very
rare.
unusual. Yeah.
Yes, one in London and one in the north of the country. And he replied in positive terms. So we met, we discussed how I might be able to give healing to patients in hospital beds and also people who are outpatients. So he applied to the hospital for permission, and that took 1.5 years to come, presumably because it was so new and different. But then we had permission. So I started work at the hospital, and the people that I was seeing would have just had a consultation with Dr. Singh, and he would ask them if they would like a healing session with me. And if they did, and most did, they would come to the next room to his, another consultation room, and have a half an hour. Well, it takes 20 minutes, but add on a few minutes to say hello and goodbye.
Sure.
And they would have this half an hour with me. And the things that they were saying afterwards, because Dr. Singh in the early days would want to see these people straight after the healing session to see how they fared. And the wonderful things that they were saying were disappearing into the ether. So within a few weeks, I asked Dr. Singh if I could create an audit so that we could ask questions about pain relief, stress relief, how they were getting on with people now, how they were sleeping now. And some of those were immediate questions that they would be able to know a measure for that after a healing session. And then they would fill in another questionnaire the same 1 week later. So the information that was coming back was staggering. This was being put into graphs that you could really see the difference that it was making to people. And some people were so dramatic in their response that Dr. Singh was convinced that something was happening to his patients that was extra, way beyond. These people had been suffering for a long time.
So let me ask you this. I would love to ask a few questions in this, because this is so fascinating. What were some of the ailments that the people were experiencing? Was it a control situation where they were all experiencing the same types of things, or were there different issues with the patients?
With these outpatients that I was doing the audit in, Dr. Singh is a consultant gastroenterologist. So this is all gastro issues. I don't ask what the problem is with anybody, but it was clear in this situation that they had gastro problems. But if someone were to ask me for a healing session anywhere else, I don't ask what's the matter. There's no need to. The healing energy just goes where it's needed. But for these people, they certainly had gastro problems, but it wasn't always the worst thing in their life. And one lady who had 30 years addiction to coffee, strong coffee, and plenty of it, and it was affecting the whole of her system, and her hospital file was inches thick with all of the treatments and investigations. And after one session, that disappeared. And her tests from then all showed up clear. So she was then discharged from the hospital, and a letter went to her own family doctor, which we call a GP here in England. And so that was astonishing. But there was another one where a young lad, Dr. Singh doesn't normally see youngsters. He only normally sees adults. But a paediatrician had heard of his reputation and wanted Dr. Singh to see this young lad who was maybe 11 I would think. And he had been struggling with what felt like fire in his stomach, and that would sometimes rise up. And he was in such terrible pain. He couldn't now go to school or do his favourite sports or his love of McDonald's. No, none of these things he could do.
Well, he should probably not fall in love with McDonald's so much. That might be part of the problem. But please continue.
But that was his favourite thing to have as a treat. And yes, I know. So he had 20 minutes with, well, probably half an hour. It was a slightly longer session with him. But after that one healing session, he had no more issues at all. And when I took him back to his mother in the waiting area, her face actually lost its colour and her jaw physically dropped. But she could see this smiling boy now with a skip in his step, but they had a blood test to rush to. So she whisked him off, and I didn't expect to hear from him or see him ever again. That's the normal thing. When you have a healing session, you just give a healing session and that's it. You don't always hear whatever happened. We don't ask anyway. That's not our business. But when I got home that evening, there had been a dozen messages on the answer phone, and now the phone was ringing again, and it was this boy. And he'd found out my number to just thank me. And he told me that he had taken on board this technique I'd introduced him to. And when he went for that blood test, he was afraid of needles and they were running short of time, and the nurse couldn't find a vein and they had to do it twice. But he used this technique I gave him and the fear disappeared and he didn't feel the needles. And then when he was on the way home with his mom, he felt a headache coming and he used the technique again and it disappeared. Now, the results of that one boy in such a short time was so astonishing, intriguing for Dr. Singh, that he went to that boy's home and interviewed him, and he never did have any one of those symptoms ever again. And it was only by thinking back that he realised how much he had been stressing about everything.
Right.
Schoolwork and anything. Right. He was so stressed and he hadn't realised it. But so that was the cause.
That is such an amazing story. And being able to apply this for oneself is great. Talk a little bit about the data then. So you're doing the healing sessions with all these patients. And they're giving feedback. So are you collecting the data then and comparing that to the patients that you did healing sessions with, as opposed to the data from the ones who did not? How exactly did the research work?
The initial thing was only my hospital audit. So now I started work at the hospital in the September. And in the November, so just 2 months after I'd started there and maybe a month into doing the audit, ultimately I did an audit of over 250 people. But now this is a different thing now, because in the November, the National Lottery announced that they were offering research money for projects that were difficult to get funding for. Definitely spiritual healing ticks that box. And that people wanted, and my audit showed that people did want to have healing, because on the 1 week later form, I asked if you were to be offered a series of spiritual healing sessions, would you like to have that? And they ticked that box. And the other thing that was required was that it was good for people. The research money would be for a project that would help people. And my audit proved that part as well. So I took that information in to Dr. Singh. This was another miracle I knew about it, because it was one lady who belonged to the Healing Trust. She'd heard about me working in a hospital and that I'd gained lottery grants before to set up a healing group, which had never been done before. And so she emailed me with this announcement. I never heard of her before. I never met her. I've never heard of her since. But I took that news into Dr. Singh, and by now he'd seen more than enough to know that this was helping his patients. And bear in mind, his patients had been ill for so long, and they were highly skeptical of healing. They're not the same kind of people that came to our healing group. The people who came to the healing group were optimistic of a positive outcome. They were prepared to come out of their way. They were prepared to put a donation in the tin to help overheads, because we still had rent to pay. But these people, they only wanted more medication. That's all they thought would help them. This young boy in his recording was saying, I only needed more medication. This is stupid having healing. But after the healing session, he felt quite differently about it. And
that's fabulous.
This was the same attitude of these hospital patients.
Yeah, I think that's important, because the attitude one goes into this with obviously influences what they may or may not say. If they are a believer and they're already kind of on board, you have to imagine that they're probably going to produce, maybe it's just mind over matter, placebo effect, etc. But it's very telling when you have people who may not necessarily, go into this with that level of belief. So let me ask you about the medical community. Obviously, this Dr. Singh was helping you immensely. What are other doctors? What feedback do you get from the medical community? Is there skepticism? Are they interested, curious? What's the medical community saying?
Well, I must admit, there was a funny story where Dr. Singh gathered round all the other consultants in his department and asked this lady who just had a healing session from me. And he said, he asked this lady in front of all the other consultants and registrars, how was that healing session? And she said, it was fantastic. And he said to these other consultants, how many patients say that about our consultations? But the idea here at the hospital was to have healing running alongside the conventional healthcare. And if I get back to how this lottery money came about, it was because Dr. Singh had now seen the benefit to his own patients with this one healing session that I was offering. And each person that I gave a session to, I also gave them a leaflet about our voluntary healing group, which wasn't far away from the hospital. They could have easily gone, but none of them did. Hardly any did, because Dr. Singh discovered a long time afterwards that they felt assured and safe in the hospital. They didn't want to go somewhere that was outside of a conventional setting. They felt that the healer had been past some of referral, and that the therapy itself had been ticked as safe and effective. But then when this lottery money was being offered, I mentioned it to Dr. Singh, and by chance, he was a senior lecturer also at the University of Birmingham's medical school. And the University of Birmingham belongs to the Russell Group, which is the UK equivalent of America's Ivy League. It's one of the best universities here. And so he was able to know who would be the best, most qualified researchers for this kind of trial. So he engaged them, got them interested, and so that got the university on board. And the project had to be applied for by, the application for the money had to be applied for by a charity that was local to where the work was carried out. And as luck would have it, Dr. Singh was trustee of a medical charity in Birmingham, UK, and he got them on board. They were keen to be involved. And it was actually there, miles away from this hospital, where he had picked up a leaflet about our group. At that particular charity, they use Healing Trust. They did use Healing Trust members to complement the provision of care alongside GPs, doctors,
Sure.
at their facility. So now Dr. Singh had got everybody together that could now make an application, and the competition for this money was really hot. Hundreds of charities applied for it, but we were successful in a grant, and that was £205,000, which would be something like $280,000. And it was for this program, it was only people with irritable bowel syndrome in one group and inflammatory bowel disease in another group, which originally was only to include ulcerative colitis sufferers. But there weren't enough people to populate that half of the number, so it was expanded to include Crohn's disease sufferers, which is another horrible, horrible disease to have. And the reason they wanted IBS looked at separately to IBD is because a syndrome is a condition where any tests show normal results, and yet the symptoms, which are horrible, are real. Yeah. And the disease group, inflammatory bowel disease, they do have lesions and sores and ulcers, whatever it is, throughout the digestive tract. Ulcerative colitis from the stomach down, I think, and colitis all the way through. Miserable. And IBS and IBD sufferers, the symptoms affect their entire life. It's the work life, the social life, the sex life. They can't go out sometimes without knowing where the next bathroom is. And some can't leave the house for fear of that. Yeah. It is awful. So Dr. Singh was always on the lookout. Yeah. Dr. Singh is always on the lookout for additional ways to help his patients. And he does have enough, more than enough clout to be able to use some of these for his patients. He is the hero of this whole story. He
sounds like quite a guy. Yeah, he sounds like quite a guy. Is. Where do you see this going? What's on the horizon? Where would you like to see this research take people's understanding of spiritual healing and how it can complement and coexist with modern medicine?
Well, I've given as much information as I possibly can in my book that underpins this research was done in such a way that any hospital, any doctor's surgery, we call it a surgery here, I think it's called a doctor's office in the States. So It sounds like you're going to have an operation in a doctor's surgery, but you don't.
Yeah. So here surgery is they're opening you up and there's something going on, but I understand.
That's right.
Terminology. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So this program, this trial showed that you can carry on doing your normal thing with conventional care for these patients, for any patient, whatever the situation is. It doesn't have to be gastro. It can be any issue that someone has. So a doctor could enlist the help of a healer to work alongside whatever he's doing or she's doing for their patients. And if they weren't sure it was helping, they could use these same questionnaires, or some of them, because there were 3 questionnaires used in our trial. One was for general quality of life. There was a doctor in England who wanted to know that whatever she did for her patients was helping them in not just the thing they came for, but for their whole experience of life. So this questionnaire covers everything, really, the worst things that might be happening in someone's life. And then the other 2 questionnaires were for quality of life for, say, IBS sufferers would fill one in for IBS and quality of life. The ulcerative colitis people would be specific for their disease, it is, of quality of life there. And then another one for symptoms, just symptoms. One for the IBS people, one for the colitis.
You've been very, very detail oriented in how you did the questionnaires and all the research and everything. So you were able to present your information, your research to the Parliament in London. Let me ask you this, Sandy. If you could hand your copy of your book to one individual in the world, the most important person to see this, hand them a copy of your book, knowing that they would read it. Who do you think is the most vital person to read your book and understand what its contents are?
I think everybody would benefit, but the people, well, I do believe everybody would definitely benefit from reading my book, because it signposts you to so much more information and incredible practitioners who have healed themselves of death situations or incredible depths of depression or other things that have affected these people. They've recovered using their own method and then gone ahead training other people. So those people, and when one person, even if one person recovers from the worst thing, nothing can happen outside of the laws of science. It's just that we don't know all the laws of science. And my book shows why, and not why, but places where you can see we don't know everything. We can't. But if there were one person, it would have to be someone who could spread this knowledge far and wide. And someone like Oprah Winfrey would probably be so well known and well read. I don't know.
Oprah, if you're listening,
I don't know.
For you. Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. Sandy, tell everybody where people can go to find out more about you, to find the book, your website. Give us the details, please.
So my website is www.healinginahospital.uk. And on my website, if people can't get to a healer, then, and it doesn't have to be spiritual healing taught by the Healing Trust. It could be Reiki or therapeutic touch is popular in the States. I've trained with Reiki, just the first courses, to see what the difference is. And it is it's been made more complicated to my mind. With therapeutic touch, there seems to be psychic abilities needed. And again, we are only giving healing. We're not getting involved in psychic or mediumship or anything else. And to my mind, that makes it simple. And it means I don't have to ask anybody what's the matter with them. And we do the whole body every time. If someone comes with a bad shoulder, we still do the whole body. I wouldn't even know they had a bad shoulder. People haven't told me what the matter is. But after the session of maybe my hand has shaken around the shoulder or something, and then I say, oh, my hand was shaking there, did you feel it? And they'd, oh, that's where I had the injury. So it's surprising.
Amazing.
It is surprising. And considering I had no sign of energies at all for many years after I was trained, it's astonishing to me that now I do have tingling and heat and cold, as does the patient. We have to tell them before they have the session, you might feel these things, but it's perfectly normal. And other people feel nothing at all.
Absolutely amazing research. Sandy Edwards, author of the book, Spiritual Healing in Hospitals and Clinics. Oh my God, I could talk to you all day, but we have to go. Her book is for everybody, but especially for Oprah. So Oprah, grab yourself a copy. Sandy Edwards, thank you so much for being here today on the Books That Make You show. I appreciate it. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed myself. Thank you for making it so easy to talk to you. Do you know, I've healed myself mostly of public speaking issues. I was unable to even read off a piece of paper before. Ridiculous.
Oh, well, you did fantastic. I can tell.
Thank you.
It's working.
Thank you.
You bet. And thank you, everybody, for being with us here today on the Books That Make You show. Again, my name is Desiree Duffy, your host, and inviting you to check out our website. It's booksthatmakeyou.com. We're also on Facebook and on Instagram and, of course, on YouTube. Do please ring the bell, subscribe to our channel so that you can always be alerted when we have great guests like Sandy Edwards on the show. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy every single book that makes you exactly who you are.
The executive producer for Books That Make You is Desiree Duffy. Produced and sound mastered by Phil Giangrande. Engineering by Dave Nabox. Social media and promotion by Bree Sweeter. For more, visit booksthatmakeyou.com.